A determined researcher walks through the forest, carrying memories of a missing father and the hope of uncovering secrets hidden in nature. But his work is interrupted when he finds a mother bear and her cub surrounded by imminent danger from predators. As he struggles to protect the animals and document his discoveries, echoes of the past begin to resurface with overwhelming force. In the midst of the jungle, he realizes that some answers only come to light when you dare to face your own fears. Before listening to this exciting story, remember to subscribe to the channel. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, when Emily Carter, a 28-year-old biologist, entered the dense forest of the Appalachian Mountains. Her brown hair, tied back in a braid, swayed gently as she walked determinedly along the leaf-covered path. The sounds of the forest awakening surrounded her. Birdsong, the whisper of leaves stirred by the breeze, and the occasional crunch of branches under her feet. Emily adjusted her backpack, filled with research equipment and supplies. She had been studying black bear behavior in this region for years, but today she felt a special excitement. She had recently detected signs of a female bear with her cub, and she was determined to document their behavior for her doctoral thesis. As she advanced, her thoughts wandered to her past. She grew up in a small town at the foot of these mountains, the daughter of a forest ranger and a teacher. Her childhood was filled with excursions into nature and fascination with wildlife. However, not all memories were happy. The image of her father, who disappeared 5 years ago during a patrol, still haunted her. The official investigation concluded that he had been the victim of an accident, but Emily always suspected there was more to that story. A sudden noise pulled her from her reverie. She stopped dead in her tracks, straining her ears. There it was again, a soft growl followed by the rustle of leaves. With her heart pounding rapidly, Emily moved cautiously toward the source of the sound. She carefully parted some branches and held her breath at the scene unfolding before her eyes. Less than 20 meters away, a majestic black bear walked calmly, closely followed by her small cub. Emily watched in awe as the cub imitated its mother's movements, occasionally stopping to sniff a flower or scratch the bark of a tree. The scene was so peaceful and beautiful that she almost forgot to take out her camera to document it. With hands trembling from excitement, she began to record. The lens captured the bear's shiny fur, her attentive and protective eyes, and the clumsy but adorable movements of the cub. Emily smiled, thinking about how this footage could be crucial for her research on black bear parenting patterns. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The bear stopped abruptly, her ears moving nervously and her nose rising to sniff the air. Something wasn't right. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Years of field experience had taught her to recognize the signs of danger in the forest. The silence that followed was oppressive. Not even the birds were singing anymore. The bear gently but firmly pushed her cub backward, positioning herself protectively in front of it. Emily held her breath, her finger still on the camera's record button. That's when she heard it. A distant howl, but unmistakable. Coyotes. And not just one, but several. The sound made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Coyotes weren't usually a threat to adult bears, but a cub, that was a different story. The bear growled softly, as if trying not to alarm her cub while guiding it towards a denser area of the forest. Emily knew she should keep her distance, but her researcher's instinct urged her to follow. With stealthy movements, she began to advance, maintaining a safe distance. The forest seemed to close in around her as she ventured deeper into the thicket. The howls were getting closer, and Emily could feel the tension growing in the air. The bear moved with a mixture of urgency and caution, constantly looking back to make sure her cub was following closely. Suddenly, a movement in the bushes caught Emily's attention. For a moment, she thought she saw a flash of grey fur. Her heart raced even more. The coyotes were close, very close. The bear sensed it too. She stopped in a small clearing, turning slowly, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. The cub, sensing danger, clung to its mother's legs, visibly trembling. Emily knew she was witnessing something extraordinary and potentially dangerous. Her scientific mind told her she should document everything, but a part of her wanted to intervene, to do something to help the bear and her cub. She fought against that impulse, reminding herself that nature has its own rules and that her interference could make things worse. As the tension increased, Emily noticed something else, a faint but distinctive smell in the air. It was a scent she knew well, one that instantly transported her back to her childhood. It was her father's scent, a mixture of pine, leather, and the homemade soap her mother used to make. For a moment, she was paralyzed. How was this possible? It had been years since her father's disappearance. Before she could process this discovery, a coyote emerged from the bushes, quickly followed by two others. The bear rose up on her hind legs, emitting a deafening roar that echoed throughout the forest. Emily instinctively ducked, her camera still recording the scene. The coyotes began to circle the bear and her cub, moving in an ever-tightening circle. The bear stood firm, her claws ready, her fierce eyes defying the attackers. The terrified cub hid between its mother's legs. Just when it seemed the attack was imminent, a deafening noise broke the air. It was a gunshot. The coyotes scattered instantly, disappearing into the underbrush as quickly as they had come. The bear, taking advantage of the confusion, grabbed her cub by the scruff of the neck and quickly moved away in the opposite direction. Emily, her heart pounding wildly, turned towards the source of the shot. Through the mist that was beginning to rise, she saw a familiar silhouette. It was tall, sturdy, with a thick beard and a rifle in hand. It couldn't be, but it was. "Dad," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure approached slowly, and as the fog dissipated, the features became clearer. It was him, her father, alive after all these years. Emily felt the world spinning around her. So many questions flooded her mind. How? Why? Where had he been all this time? But before she could articulate any of them, her father spoke, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Emily, my girl, we have a lot to talk about." The forest fell silent, as if holding its breath at this unexpected reunion. The young biologist suddenly found herself on the threshold of a mystery much bigger than the one she had come to investigate. The bear and her cub were safe for now, but Emily sensed that her own adventure was just beginning. With the camera still in her trembling hands, Emily took a step towards her father, towards a past she thought was lost and a future full of unknowns. The sun, now fully above the horizon, bathed the clearing in a golden light, as if illuminating the path to the answers she had sought for so long. The afternoon sun filtered through the dense foliage of the forest, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. Emily walked back to her camp, her mind still reeling from the extraordinary events she had witnessed that morning. The camera, which hung heavily from her neck, contained images that could revolutionize scientific understanding of black bear behavior. As she advanced along the path, a sudden crunch made her stop in her tracks. Years of field experience had taught her to distinguish between the normal sounds of the forest and those that indicated the presence of something larger. Cautiously, she crouched behind a fallen tree and waited. Moments later, a figure emerged from the bushes. It was a tall man, about 50 years old, with a graying beard and penetrating eyes that scanned the forest with the keen gaze of a predator. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a machete on his belt. Emily held her breath, immediately recognizing the man. It was Jack Thompson, a well-known poacher in the region. Emily's heart pounded hard as she watched Jack move stealthily through the forest. What was he doing here? Had he seen the mother bear and her cub? The very idea sent a chill down her spine. When Jack finally disappeared from view, Emily emerged from her hiding place, her mind racing. She had to do something to protect the bears, but what? Reporting Jack's presence to the authorities would take too long, and by then it could be too late. As she struggled with this dilemma, a sudden memory hit her like lightning. Jack Thompson. The name sounded familiar for another reason. With a choked gasp, Emily remembered an old photograph she had seen in her grandfather's cabin years ago. In it, a young Jack Thompson smiled next to her grandfather, both dressed in ranger uniforms. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the situation. How had Jack gone from being a ranger to a poacher? And what connection did this have to her grandfather, who had inspired her love for nature? Determined to find answers, Emily quickened her pace towards her camp. She needed to review her notes, analyze the video she had recorded, and most importantly, contact her grandfather. She had a feeling that today's events were connected to a much bigger mystery. Upon reaching her tent, Emily immediately turned on her laptop and began downloading the images from her camera. While waiting, she pulled out her satellite phone and dialed her grandfather's number. "Grandpa?" she said when he answered. "It's Emily. I need to ask you something important." "Emily, my girl," her grandfather's warm voice greeted her. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Grandpa," she assured him. "But today I saw someone. Do you remember Jack Thompson?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When her grandfather spoke again, his voice sounded tense. "Jack Thompson, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Where did you see him?" "Here in the forest," Emily replied. "Grandpa, what happened between you two? Why did he become a poacher?" Another silence, this one even longer than the previous one. Finally, her grandfather sighed deeply. "It's a long story, Emily. One I hoped I'd never have to tell. But I guess it's time you knew the truth." As her grandfather began to narrate a story of friendship, betrayal, and buried secrets, Emily sat down in her camp chair, her eyes fixed on her laptop screen, where the images of the mother bear, her cub, and the mysterious male bear played silently. "It all started 30 years ago, her grandfather began. "Jack and I were best friends, dedicated to protecting the forest and its wildlife. But one day we discovered something that would change our lives forever." Her grandfather's voice faded as Emily immersed herself in the story, a story that promised to reveal not only Jack Thompson's past, but also secrets about her own family and the true nature of the forest that surrounded her. As she listened, her eyes fell on a frozen image on her screen, the mother bear and the male bear, side by side, protecting the cub. Somehow Emily knew that the fate of these bears was intertwined with the secrets her grandfather was about to reveal. The sun was setting on the horizon, tinting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, a coyote's howl broke the silence, a reminder that the dangers of the forest were never far away. Emily settled into her chair, preparing for a night of revelations that would change the course of her research and, possibly, her life. "It all began with a discovery," her grandfather continued, "a discovery that some would consider a treasure, and others a curse." Emily listened attentively, unaware that a few kilometers away, Jack Thompson was stopping in a clearing, his eyes fixed on some marks on the ground. A grim smile spread across his face as he muttered to himself, "I found you, old friend. After all these years, I finally found you." Night fell over the forest, enveloping everything in shadows and mystery. Secrets buried for decades were beginning to emerge, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test not only Emily's determination, but also the bonds between humans and animals in this delicate ecosystem. As they moved away, the paintings on the cave wall continued to grow, narrating a story that was just beginning. The ancient magic flowed through the forest, whispering promises of a brighter tomorrow for all. Emily's grandfather's voice trembled slightly as he continued his story, the sound distorted by the satellite connection, making his words seem to come from another world. 30 years ago, Jack and I discovered something extraordinary deep in the forest, he began. An ancient cave, hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, we found cave paintings that no one had seen in centuries. Emily held her breath, imagining the scene. Her grandfather continued, "But these weren't ordinary paintings. They showed the ancient inhabitants of these lands interacting with animals in an unusual way, especially with the bears. It was as if there was a special connection, almost mystical, between them." "What kind of connection?" Emily asked, intrigued. "The paintings suggested that the ancients could communicate with the bears, understand them. And more than that, it seemed they could influence their behavior, guide them." Emily thought of the mother bear and the male bear, how they had acted that morning. Could there be some connection? "Jack became obsessed with the discovery," her grandfather continued. "He believed that if we could decipher the secret of the paintings, we could control the animals of the forest. I wanted to report the finding, but he had other ideas." The old man's voice broke. "One night I found Jack in the cave. He had captured a young bear and was experimenting on it, trying to recreate what the paintings showed. It was horrible, Emily. We had a terrible fight. In the struggle, part of the cave collapsed. The bear escaped, but the paintings were buried. Emily listened, horrified. What happened next? I reported Jack to the authorities, but he escaped before they could arrest him. He disappeared for years. I sealed the entrance to the cave and swore never to reveal its location. Until now, I believed that secret had died with me. A shiver ran down Emily's spine. But now Jack is back, she murmured. Yes, her grandfather confirmed gravely. And if he's there, it can only mean one thing. He's looking for the cave again. Emily looked at the images on her laptop, her mind racing. Grandpa, today I saw something incredible. An adult male bear appeared out of nowhere to protect a female and her cub from a pack of coyotes. They acted different, as if they understood each other. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When her grandfather spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. Emily, listen to me carefully. That male bear, did you notice anything unusual about him? Any mark or scar? Emily frowned, zooming in on the images, and then she saw it. A barely visible scar on the right shoulder of the bear she had called Thunder. Yes, she said, surprised. He has a scar on his shoulder. How did you know? Her grandfather exhaled heavily. Because that's the bear Jack captured 30 years ago. The one that escaped from the cave. The revelation hit Emily like a wave. Suddenly everything seemed to connect. The unusual behavior of the bears, Jack's return, the ancient secrets of the forest. Emily, her grandfather's voice became urgent. You have to find that cave before Jack does. The knowledge it contains, in the wrong hands, it could be disastrous. Not just for the animals, but for the entire ecosystem. But how? Emily asked, feeling the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders. I don't know where to look. Follow the bears, her grandfather replied. Thunder will remember the way. But be careful. Jack is dangerous and he won't stop at anything to get what he wants. As the call ended, Emily sat in silence, processing everything she had learned. Outside, the forest seemed more alive than ever, full of hidden secrets and dangers. With determination, she began to prepare her equipment. Tomorrow at dawn, she would begin her search, not just for the cave, but for the truth behind the connection between humans and animals that had remained hidden for centuries. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Jack Thompson studied an old map by the light of a flashlight. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of greed and obsession. Soon, he muttered to himself, soon I'll have the power that should have been mine all along. In the darkness of the night, a distant howl echoed through the forest. The animals could sense that something was changing. An ancient magic, dormant for centuries, was beginning to awaken. Emily lay down in her sleeping bag, her mind full of unanswered questions. What secrets did the cave really hold? How had Thunder survived all these years? And most importantly, could she decipher the mystery before Jack? As sleep overtook her, she had one last vision. The mother bear, Thunder, and their cub, standing at the entrance of a hidden cave, like guardians of ancient knowledge. In her dream, the bears looked directly at her, their eyes full of ancient wisdom and a silent plea. The adventure had barely begun, and Emily knew that the coming days would bring challenges that would test not only her intellect, but also her courage and her connection to the nature she loved so much. Dawn arrived with a thick mist that crept between the trees, giving the forest an ethereal and mysterious appearance. Emily woke up before the first ray of sunlight, her mind still spinning with the information she had received the night before. With quick and precise movements, she packed her essential equipment: camera, GPS, first aid kit, provisions, and most importantly, her field journal, where she had meticulously noted every detail of her observations about the mother bear, Thunder, and their cub. As she ventured into the thickness of the forest, Emily couldn't help but feel that nature's eyes were upon her. Every crunch of a branch, every whisper of leaves seemed to carry a hidden message. Follow the bears, her grandfather had said. But how? After hours of walking, Emily reached the clearing where she had witnessed the confrontation between the bears and the coyotes. She stopped, examining the ground for tracks or any sign that could indicate the direction the bears had taken. Suddenly, a movement in the periphery of her vision caught her attention. Among the bushes, a pair of curious eyes watched her. It was the mother bear's cub. The little bear stared at her for a moment, as if evaluating her, before turning around and disappearing into the vegetation. Without thinking twice, Emily followed it. The cub guided her through almost invisible paths, winding between century-old trees and moss-covered rocks. As they advanced, the terrain became more rugged, and the sound of running water began to grow louder. After what seemed like hours, the cub stopped at the edge of a small cliff. Below, a river roared forcefully, its turbulent waters crashing against the rocks. And there, on the opposite shore, were the mother bear and Thunder. Emily held her breath. The two adult bears seemed to be waiting, their eyes fixed on her. Thunder, imposing and majestic, had an expression that Emily could only describe as wisdom. The scar on his shoulder, a testament to his encounter with Jack decades ago, shimmered faintly under the light filtered by the forest canopy. But how to cross the river? The waters were too fast and dangerous to attempt swimming. It was then that Emily noticed something strange, a series of stones protruding from the water, forming a precarious but viable path to the other side. With her heart pounding heavily, Emily began to cross. Each step was a challenge, the slippery stones threatening to send her into the turbulent waters. Halfway across, her foot slipped, and for a terrifying moment she thought she would fall. But somehow she regained her balance. When she finally reached the other shore, she was soaked and shaking but exultant. The mother bear and Thunder looked at her with what seemed to be approval. The cub, which had crossed the river with enviable ease, approached her and gave her a gentle nudge with its snout. It was at that moment that Emily noticed something on the rocky wall behind the bears, faint but unmistakable marks. Moving closer, she saw that they were cave paintings, similar to those her grandfather had described. Human and bear figures intertwined in what appeared to be a ritual dance. As she examined the paintings, a noise startled her. Human voices and the sound of breaking branches were approaching. The mother bear and Thunder went on alert, their bodies tense. Emily turned just in time to see Jack Thompson emerging from the thicket on the other side of the river, accompanied by two armed men. Jack's eyes widened in surprise at seeing Emily, but quickly narrowed with determination. "Well, well," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It seems my old friend's granddaughter has decided to join the hunt. Why don't you help us cross, dear? There's much to discuss." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She was trapped between Jack and his men on one side and the bears on the other. But when she looked at Thunder, she saw a determination in his eyes that matched her own. Somehow she knew she wasn't alone in this fight. As Jack began to cross the river, Emily realized she was about to face not just a poacher, but a battle for the very future of the forest and its inhabitants. The ancient paintings seemed to come to life around her, whispering long-forgotten secrets. The true test was about to begin, and Emily knew that the decision she would make in the next moments could change the course of history, not just for her, but for the entire forest and its mysterious guardians. The tension in the air was palpable as Jack and his men began to cross the precarious stone bridge. Emily, her heart racing frantically, looked around for an escape route. The mother bear and Thunder moved, positioning themselves protectively in front of her and the cub. Suddenly, Thunder let out a roar that seemed to shake the earth itself. It wasn't a sound of threat, but something deeper, more ancient. The cave paintings on the rock wall began to glow faintly, as if responding to the bear's call. Jack, halfway across the river, stopped, his eyes widening with a mixture of awe and greed. "I knew it," he shouted over the roar of the water. "The power is real." Emily felt a strange energy course through her body. Her grandfather's stories, the paintings, the bear's behavior, everything was starting to make sense. There was an ancient connection between humans and animals, a forgotten magic that was awakening. Without thinking, Emily placed her hand on Thunder's fur. In that instant, a flood of images inundated her mind. She saw the forest through the eyes of generations of bears, felt the rhythm of nature pulsing around her, understood secrets that had remained hidden for centuries. "Stop!" she shouted at Jack and his men, her voice charged with an authority she didn't know she possessed. "This knowledge is not to be exploited. It's a gift, a responsibility." Jack, however, was not willing to give up. "You're naive, girl," he spat. "With this power we could control everything. Think of the possibilities." But as he spoke, something strange began to happen. The animals of the forest started to emerge from among the trees: cougars, raccoons, birds of all colors. They gathered around Emily and the bears, as if responding to a silent call. The mother bear's cub stepped forward, its eyes shining with wisdom beyond its years. It let out a soft growl, and to everyone's amazement, Emily understood it perfectly. "He says the forest is alive," Emily translated, her voice trembling with emotion. "That we're all part of it, and that true power lies in harmony, not control." Jack's men, overwhelmed by the supernatural scene before them, began to back away. One of them lost his balance on the slippery rocks and fell into the turbulent water. Without hesitation, Thunder plunged into the river. With surprising strength and agility, the bear swam to the man and dragged him back to shore, saving him from certain death. This act of bravery seemed to break something in Jack. His face, previously contorted by ambition, softened. "What have I done?" he murmured, falling to his knees on the rock. Emily, guided by an instinct she didn't fully understand, approached him. "It's not too late, Jack," she said softly. "The forest forgives, but it also remembers. We can learn from it, work with it, not against it." As she spoke, the cave paintings glowed more intensely. Images of humans and animals cooperating, living in harmony, danced before their eyes. Jack looked around at the gathered animals, at the bears he had once tried to control, and finally at Emily, whose eyes reflected the ancient wisdom that had just awakened. "I've been so blind," he finally said, "all these years, seeking power, when the true magic was in connection, in balance." As the sun began to set, bathing the scene in a golden light, Emily understood that this was not the end of her journey, but barely the beginning. There was ancient knowledge to rediscover, a harmony to restore between humans and nature. The mother bear approached her, her cub following closely. The bear tilted her head, as if inviting her to move forward. Emily understood the message. She had been chosen as the guardian of this secret, as a bridge between two worlds. As the disparate group, humans, bears, and a multitude of forest creatures, began to move towards the hidden cave behind the waterfall, Emily felt a deep sense of purpose. The challenges they would face would be great, but so would the rewards. The ancient magic of the forest had awakened, and with it the hope for a future where humans and animals could coexist in true harmony. The journey had just begun, and Emily was ready to lead the way towards a new dawn. The heterogeneous group slowly advanced towards the waterfall, guided by the mother bear and Thunder. Emily walked alongside Jack, who seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. His men followed at a prudent distance, still stunned by the recent events. As they approached the curtain of water, Emily noticed that the sound of the waterfall subtly changed. There was an echo, a resonance that suggested a hidden space behind it. Thunder was the first to go through the waterfall, momentarily disappearing behind the liquid veil. The mother bear and her cub followed, and Emily, taking a deep breath, ventured into the icy water. On the other side, she was left breathless. They were in an enormous cavern, illuminated by a soft light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The cave paintings here were more elaborate and vivid than those outside, covering every available inch of rock. "Incredible," whispered Jack, his voice mixing with the echo of the waterfall. "After all these years." Emily moved forward, her eyes trying to absorb every detail. The paintings told a story. They showed the first humans arriving in these lands, encountering the animals, learning to communicate with them. There were scenes of hunting, but also of cooperation and mutual respect. In the center of the cavern, a circle of stones surrounded what appeared to be an ancient altar. Thunder approached it, and to everyone's surprise rose up on his hind legs, placing his front paws on the central stone. A soft glow began to emanate from the altar, extending across the cavern floor in intricate patterns that resembled tree roots. Emily felt a warm energy course through her body, and suddenly the voices of the forest became clear in her mind. She could hear the mother bear's thoughts, worried about her cub, but proud of its bravery. She heard the ancient wisdom in Thunder's mind, memories of generations of bears stored in his being. And beyond that, the whispers of the trees, the song of the birds, the murmur of the rivers. The entire forest was alive and connected. "Can you hear it?" she asked Jack, her eyes shining with wonder. The old hunter nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. All my life I sought this, but I misinterpreted it completely. It's not about control, it's about communion." As they spoke, more animals began to enter the cavern: cougars, raccoons, birds of brilliant colors. They all moved with purpose, as if participating in an ancient ceremony. The mother bear's cub approached Emily, its eyes full of intelligence. Through their new bond, Emily felt what it was trying to communicate. "This place," she translated for the others, "is a sanctuary, a nexus between the human world and the animal world. The ancients used it to maintain balance, to ensure that both worlds prospered in harmony." Jack knelt, reverently touching the cavern floor. "And now? What's our role in all this?" Thunder moved away from the altar, approaching Emily. The young biologist felt a wave of images and emotions coming from the bear. Generations of guardians, both human and animal, protecting this secret, maintaining the balance. "We are the new guardians," Emily said, her voice firm with the certainty of her new purpose. "We must protect this place, this knowledge, use it to heal the breach between humans and nature." The mother bear approached Jack, looking at him with eyes that contained both forgiveness and warning. The old hunter bowed his head in understanding and repentance. "I will dedicate the rest of my life to making amends for my mistakes," Jack promised, "to protecting what I once sought to exploit." As they spoke, Emily noticed that the paintings on the walls seemed to come to life, moving gently as if they were breathing. The story continued, and now they were part of it. The mother bear's cub playfully circled the altar, its innocence a reminder of the continuous renewal of life. Emily smiled, understanding that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. "We have a long way to go," she said, looking around at the strange assembly of humans and animals. "We need to learn the ancient ways, find ways to apply this wisdom in the modern world." Jack nodded, a new light of determination in his eyes. "And we must protect this place from those who might use it for selfish ends." Thunder let out a soft growl of approval. Through their new connection, Emily understood that the bear was offering his help, and that of all the animals in the forest in this task. As the group began to discuss plans and strategies, Emily realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just a biologist studying wildlife from the outside. She was now an integral part of the delicate balance of the forest. The sun was setting outside the cavern, its last rays filtering through the waterfall and creating a spectacle of light and water. It was the end of an extraordinary day, but the beginning of a new era. Emily looked at the mother bear, Thunder and their cub, then at Jack and his men, and finally at the various animals gathered in the cavern. They were an unlikely group, united by a common purpose and newly awakened ancient knowledge. With a smile, Emily knew that the challenges they would face would be great, but so would the rewards. The magic of the forest was alive, and they were its new guardians. The following days passed in a whirlwind of discoveries and learning. Emily, Jack, and the animals worked together to decipher the secrets hidden in the cave paintings. Each new finding revealed a deeper understanding of the connection between humans and nature. However, as they delved deeper into this ancestral knowledge, a shadow began to loom over their newly discovered paradise. One morning, as Emily meditated next to the altar in the cavern, she felt a disturbance in the forest's energy. Through her bond with the animals, she perceived a surge of fear and confusion coming from the northern part of the forest. Thunder rushed into the cavern, his eyes full of concern. Through their connection, Emily saw images of heavy machinery, falling trees, animals fleeing in panic. "Deforestation," Emily murmured, her heart sinking. "They're logging the forest." Jack, who had been studying a series of paintings nearby, approached with a frown. "It must be the logging company. I heard rumors they had obtained new permits, but I didn't think they'd act so quickly." Emily stood up, a fierce determination shining in her eyes. "We have to stop them. They're not just destroying the habitat, they're disturbing the balance we've sworn to protect." The mother bear and her cub approached, their expressions reflecting the urgency of the situation. The young bear, which had grown considerably in the past few weeks, let out a defiant growl. "You're right," Emily said, stroking its fur. "We can't stand idly by. Jack nodded, a spark of his old fire returning to his eyes. I know some people in the local government. I can try to find out more about these permits, see if there's any legal way to stop them. That will take time, Emily replied, shaking her head. Time that the forest doesn't have. We need to act now. It was then that the mother bear's cub had an idea. Through their mental link, it shared images of the forest animals working together to create obstacles, confuse the workers, delay the logging. Emily smiled, impressed by the young bear's intelligence. It's risky, but it could work. If we manage to delay the operation long enough, maybe Jack can find a legal solution. The next few days were a frenzy of activity. Emily, guided by the wisdom of Thunder and the mother bear, coordinated the forest animals in a campaign of peaceful but effective resistance. Raccoons threw acorns at the machines, clogging their mechanisms. Cougars and bobcats prowled the edges of the logging camp, keeping the workers in a constant state of alert. Flocks of crows created a deafening noise, making communication almost impossible. Meanwhile, Jack worked tirelessly, making calls, meeting with officials, looking for any irregularity in the permits that could stop the operation. As the days passed, the loggers' frustration grew. Machines mysteriously broke down, supplies disappeared, and a general feeling of unease took over the camp. Emily watched from a distance, her heart divided between hope and fear. She knew what they were doing was dangerous. If they were discovered, the consequences could be severe. One night, as Emily rested at the entrance of the cavern, the mother bear approached her. The bear had been especially active in the resistance, her fierce maternal instinct extending to the entire forest. Through their connection, the bear shared a vision, the forest bleeding, its intertwined roots screaming in pain with each fallen tree. But she also showed hope. New shoots emerging from the scorched earth, life persisting against all odds. Emily hugged the bear, tears running down her cheeks. "I know," she whispered. "We won't give up. This is our home, our legacy. We'll fight to the end." As the sun set, painting the sky blood red, Emily felt they were on the edge of a precipice. The actions of the next few days would determine not only the fate of this forest, but possibly the future of the relationship between humans and nature. With Thunder on her right and the mother bear on her left, Emily looked towards the horizon. The battle for the heart of the forest had just begun, and she was ready to lead the charge. What none of them knew was that, in the shadows, other eyes were watching. Eyes that had detected the strange activity in the forest, eyes that sought the power that Emily and her allies protected. The true test was yet to come, and it would test not only their determination, but also the strength of the ancient magic they had awakened. Dawn brought with it an uneasy calm. Emily woke up with a sense of apprehension that she couldn't shake off. Through her connection with the animals, she perceived a growing tension in the forest, as if all of nature was holding its breath in anticipation of something imminent. As she left the cave, she noticed that Thunder was already awake, his imposing figure silhouetted against the sky that was beginning to clear. The bear looked at her, his dark eyes conveying a silent warning. "I know," Emily murmured, approaching to stroke his rough fur. "Something's not right." At that moment, Jack emerged from the thicket, his face grim. "We've got trouble," he announced without preamble. "My contacts have informed me that the logging company has hired private security, mercenaries to be precise. They're determined to put an end to any interference in their operations." Emily's heart sank. They had expected resistance, but this was something completely different. "How bad is it?" she asked, fearing the answer. "Very bad," Jack replied, running a hand through his graying hair. "These guys don't play fair, and there are rumors that they're looking for something more than just timber." Emily exchanged a look with Thunder. They both knew what that meant. Somehow news of the sanctuary of the ancient magic had leaked out. The mother bear appeared with her cub, which was no longer so small. The young bear, which Emily had started to call Nova, for its bright and energetic spirit, seemed to sense the tension in the air. "We need a plan," Emily said, her mind working at full speed. "We can't directly confront armed mercenaries, but we can't allow them to find the sanctuary either." Jack nodded, a spark of his old fire returning to his eyes. "I have an idea, but it's risky. If we can expose the logging company's illegal activities, we could force government intervention. "And how do you propose we do that?" Emily asked skeptically. "Infiltration?" Jack replied with a crooked smile. "I still have some contacts in the hunting world. I could pose as a local guide, offer my services to the mercenaries. Once inside, I could gather evidence of their illegal activities." Emily shook her head vigorously. "It's too dangerous, Jack. If they discover you—" But before she could finish, Nova, the young bear, stepped forward. Through their mental link, it shared a vision. Itself, accompanying Jack, acting as a domesticated bear to lend credibility to his story as an experienced guide. "No," Emily said firmly, immediately understanding Nova's proposal. "It's too risky for you." The mother bear growled softly, and Emily felt her reluctant approval. The mother bear understood that sometimes risks had to be taken for the greater good. Thunder approached, his presence as imposing as ever. Through their connection, Emily saw images of the forest, of generations of bears and humans working together, of sacrifices made for the sake of balance. With a deep sigh, Emily slowly nodded. "All right, but you won't go alone. I'll follow you, keeping hidden in the forest. If something goes wrong, I can alert the other animals to help you." The plan was quickly set in motion. Jack dressed in his old hunting gear, a sight that made Emily shudder internally. Nova, despite its youth, behaved with a maturity beyond its years, understanding the gravity of the situation. As they prepared to leave, Emily felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Jack, his eyes full of an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "Emily," he said softly, "if something happens to me—" "No," she interrupted him firmly. "Don't talk like that. We'll all come back, together." Jack smiled sadly. "Just listen. If something goes wrong, there's a letter in my backpack. It explains everything. The sanctuary, the ancient magic, everything. Make sure it gets to the right people." Emily nodded, her throat suddenly tight. She watched as Jack and Nova walked away, heading into the part of the forest where the mercenaries had set up their camp. With one last glance at the mother bear and Thunder, Emily plunged into the thicket, moving silently among the shadows. The fate of the forest, and possibly much more, hung by a thread. As she advanced, she couldn't help but feel that they were about to face their most difficult test yet. The ancient magic pulsed around her, as if the forest itself was holding its breath in anticipation of the battle to come. In the distance, the sound of heavy machinery broke the morning silence. The countdown had begun. The sun reached its zenith when Emily, hidden among the dense vegetation, observed the mercenaries' camp. Her heart was pounding as she watched Jack and Nova approach the entrance. From her position, she could see the tension in Jack's shoulders and the cautious determination in Nova's movements. The guards at the entrance seemed surprised to see an older man accompanied by a young bear. Jack played his role perfectly, introducing himself as an expert local guide with a trained bear. Nova, for its part, maintained a convincing facade of a docile animal, though Emily could feel its uneasiness through their bond. After a tense conversation, Jack and Nova were admitted into the camp. Emily held her breath, knowing that now she could only wait and trust that their risky plan would work. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Emily moved stealthily around the perimeter of the camp, using her connection with the forest animals to stay hidden and alert. Small birds whispered news to her, while insects and reptiles provided her with additional eyes and ears inside the camp. As the day progressed, Emily began to receive fragments of information through her bond with Nova. Images of detailed maps, conversations about ancient artifacts, and hidden powers. Her fears were confirmed. The logging company was not just after timber, but was also on the trail of the sanctuary's secrets. Suddenly, a commotion in the camp caught her attention. Through the eyes of a nearby squirrel, Emily watched in horror as Jack was dragged into a central tent, his hands tied behind his back. Nova was nowhere to be seen. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Emily forced herself to stay calm. Closing her eyes, she concentrated intensely on her bond with Nova. After a few anguishing moments, she felt the young bear's presence. It was scared but unharmed, hidden under one of the tents. Emily knew she had to act fast. With a series of soft calls and growls, she summoned the forest animals. Within minutes, an unlikely assembly had gathered around her. Cougars, raccoons, crows. and even a massive python. Through her mental connection, Emily shared a daring plan. The animals listened attentively, their eyes shining with determination. This was their home, and they would fight to protect it. As the sun began to set, the mercenaries' camp descended into chaos. A flock of crows swooped down on them, their deafening cries creating a perfect distraction. Raccoons jumped from tent to tent, stealing equipment and creating confusion. Cougars prowled the edges of the camp, their roars keeping the armed men in a constant state of panic. Amid the confusion, Emily slipped into the camp, her heart pounding loudly. Guided by her bond with Nova, she headed straight for the tent where Jack was being held. As she entered, she found herself face to face with the leader of the mercenaries, a tall man with a cruel look. Jack was tied to a chair, his face bruised, but his eyes still defiant. "Ah, another intruder," growled the leader, pulling out a gun. "Looks like we'll have to teach all of you nature lovers a lesson." But before he could do anything else, a deafening roar shook the tent. Thunder, in all his majesty, burst through the canvas, with the mother bear at his side. The mercenaries, taken by surprise, had no time to react before the bears subdued them. Emily ran to Jack, quickly freeing him from his bonds. "Where's Nova?" she asked urgently. As if answering her call, the young bear appeared at the entrance of the tent, carrying a bag full of documents in its mouth. "Smart kid." Jack smiled weakly. "It managed to steal the evidence we needed." But their victory was short-lived. Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Reinforcements were arriving. "We have to go now," Emily urged, helping Jack to his feet. The group left the tent to find a scene of total chaos. Animals and mercenaries fought throughout the camp, while the noise of the helicopters grew louder. It was then that Emily had an epiphany. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on the ancient magic that flowed through the forest. Around her, the earth began to tremble slightly. "What are you doing?" Jack shouted over the noise. "Calling on our last resort," Emily replied, her eyes shining with ancestral power. Suddenly, the ground opened up beneath the mercenaries' feet. Huge roots emerged, entangling themselves around the machines and vehicles. The forest itself was responding to its guardian's call. Taking advantage of the confusion, Emily, Jack, and the bears plunged into the thickness of the forest. Behind them, they could hear the cries of amazement and fear from the mercenaries as nature reclaimed what was hers. As they ran towards the safety of the sanctuary, Emily knew this wasn't the end. News of what had happened here would spread, and others would come seeking the power of the ancient magic. But for now they had won a crucial battle. With the evidence Nova had recovered and the testimony of what they had witnessed, they had a chance to expose the truth and protect the forest. As the group ventured deeper into the safety of their home, Emily felt a mixture of relief and determination. The struggle for balance between the human world and the natural world was far from over, but now they knew they weren't alone. The ancient magic was awake, and the forest itself was on their side. The true challenge, Emily realized, was just beginning. How could they share this wisdom with the world without endangering the delicate balance they had sworn to protect? The answer, she suspected, lay in the very heart of the sanctuary, waiting to be discovered. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the forest canopy when Emily, Jack, and their animal companions finally reached the sanctuary. Exhausted but triumphant, they collapsed onto the cave floor, breathing heavily. Nova, the young bear, carefully deposited the bag with the documents in front of Emily. She smiled gratefully, stroking its fur before turning to Jack. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing the bruises on his face. Jack nodded slowly. "I've been better, but I'll survive. The important thing is that we made it." Emily began to examine the documents Nova had recovered. Her eyes widened in amazement as she read. "This is incredible. Not only does it prove the logging company's illegal activities, but it also reveals a much larger conspiracy. There are corporations and politicians involved in the search for the source of power in the forest. The knowledge we've discovered here," Jack murmured, "in the wrong hands could be catastrophic." Thunder approached the altar in the center of the cave, letting out a soft growl. Emily stood up and joined him, placing a hand on the ancient stone. Immediately she felt a surge of energy course through her body. Through her connection to the ancient magic, Emily saw visions of a possible future. a world where humans and nature coexisted in harmony, where ancestral knowledge was used to heal and protect, not to exploit. "We have to share this with the world," Emily said, turning to the others, "but in the right way. We can't just reveal the existence of the sanctuary or the ancient magic. That would only lead to more greed and destruction." The mother bear approached her cub Nova at her side. Through their bond, Emily felt the wisdom of generations of bears, a deep understanding of the natural balance. "You're right," Jack said, standing up with difficulty. "We need a plan, a way to gradually educate the world, to change the way people see and relate to nature." Over the following days, Emily, Jack, and their animal allies worked tirelessly on a plan. Using the evidence they had gathered, they began to leak information to trusted journalists and environmental organizations. At the same time, Emily began writing a book, interweaving her scientific experiences with the lessons learned from the ancient magic. Without revealing the existence of the sanctuary, the book spoke of the deep connection between all forms of life and the importance of preserving the natural balance. Jack, for his part, used his old contacts to push for changes in conservation policies. The revelations about corruption in the logging industry led to investigations and reforms. Slowly, the message began to spread. People started to see the forest not just as a resource to exploit, but as a living, vital ecosystem of which they were all a part. A year after their initial adventure, Emily found herself again at the entrance of the sanctuary. Beside her were Thunder, the mother bear, and Nova, now almost an adult. Jack had joined a group of international conservationists, taking the lessons of the sanctuary to other parts of the world. "We've come a long way," Emily said, stroking Thunder's fur, "but there's still so much to do." Through their bond, she felt the approval and pride of the bears. The ancient magic pulsed around them, stronger than ever. At that moment, Emily noticed something on the cave walls. New paintings were slowly appearing, as if the rock itself was telling their story. She saw images of herself, of Jack, of the bears and other animals, all working together to protect the forest. She understood then that they had become part of the legend, guardians of an ancestral knowledge that could change the world. As the sun set on the horizon, bathing the forest in golden hues, Emily felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were not alone. The wisdom of antiquity, the power of nature, and the determination of the human spirit were on their side. With a smile, Emily turned to her animal companions. "Let's go," she said. "We have a world to change." And so the biologist, the bears, and all the inhabitants of the forest ventured into a new chapter of their adventure, carrying with them the hope of a future where humans and nature could coexist in true harmony. As they walked away, the paintings on the cave wall continued to grow, narrating a story that was just beginning. The ancient magic flowed through the forest, whispering promises of a brighter tomorrow for all,